Up until the time I was 8 years old, I was an only child. Now, I remember when Mom came to tell me she was going to be having a baby. She knew it was going to be tough on me because being the only child, she figured she was going to spend some quality time with me for the months coming up to the birth of the new sibling. And my dad was a businessman, so he was gone 2-3 nights a week. So it was just Mom and I. Well, she decided that we were going to make this cross-stitch needlepoint picture together. And it was a little brown-haired boy and a puppy dog that happened to look like the dog that we had. So every night after supper, I would sit next to her on the couch, and she would add to this picture. I got to pick the color of the shirt, and I was a Star Trek fan, so we went with the yellow shirt. We got the blue jeans. The puppy, we made it look just like our puppy. And it had a poem on the bottom. Talked about little boys are messy noses and ripped jeans and computer facts on their heroes. And it kind of reminded me of that poem, Snips and Snails and Puppy Dog Tails. This is what little boys are made of. I always thought that was a joke because girls got to be sugar and spice and everything nice. But it really meant a lot. And I remember I would kind of cuddle into Mom and she'd be doing this, and then she would sing to me. She would sing this song, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you, so please don't take my sunshine away." That song meant so much. It was bittersweet because Mom was my sunshine and I was hers. But it was also the bitter part was, it's like, please don't take my sunshine away. And I always thought that was so sad because I didn't want to lose Mom because she was my sunshine, and I know she didn't want to lose me. Well, when I was born, I was 10 pounds, 7 ounces. So basically, I heard the women groaning on that one. I was like a roast. And it was a hard delivery, let's just put it that way. And so they knew that this had happened, so they wanted to make sure that it wasn't so hard the second time. So they decided that they were going to induce her early. And my dad, being the ultimate businessman, convinced the doctor to do that on a Saturday. So pretty good persuasive skills. And we lived 30 miles away from where the hospital was. So I remember being excited that I was going to get to stay in a hotel. That was a big deal. And I remember sitting in the lobby waiting and being bored. And I remember my dad coming out and going to the vending machine and giving me a candy bar, and then going back in the room, and I'm sitting there watching TV. And finally he comes out and he told me I have a baby brother. Oh, as an 8-year-old boy, that was the ultimate. I had a brother. Later on, they brought me in. They couldn't go in the rooms like they do nowadays, and so they brought me in, and I got to look through the glass window, and they pointed out, the one with the cone head over there, that's your brother. So that was kind of cool, and I was all excited. And we ended up, Dad said, well, let's go out to supper. So we went and grabbed a meal. And I remember we went to this local drive-in that they had, and we got like hamburgers and French fries and a malt. And then he said, well, we better get something for Mom because the hospital food's terrible. So we came back, and he dropped the food off for her, and then we went back to the hotel. Now, for whatever reason, I remember that night that there was a Jerry Lewis movie on. He got drafted in the Army, and we were watching this stupid movie, and I just remember that. And then I remember going to sleep. Well, about sometime in the middle of the night, the phone rang. And you know when the phone rings in the middle of the night, it's either a wrong number, somebody's drunk dialing you, or it's bad news. So I kind of look over at my dad, and he's on the phone, and he says, okay, I'll be there in a second. And he hangs up, and he says, just go back to sleep, everything's okay. So I went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning, and I hear this key in the hotel door, and he's opening up the door. And as he walked in, there was a man walking in with him that had a pastoral collar on. And the two of them proceeded to tell me that my mother had died. Now, what had happened was she'd had some internal bleeding, and it got so bad that they had to do surgery. Now, what was hard about that was she had eaten, so she ended up aspirating, and it got in her lungs. Now, my dad is like the ultimate Scandinavian, like He's so Scandinavian that when I brought him to the movie Fargo, he thought it was a documentary. So he did not talk about his feelings. And so he never really told people exactly what happened, so people started to fill in the gaps themselves. And what I was told by an adult as an 8-year-old was that my mother was in the recovery room, and the nurse anesthetist who was supposed to be watching her recover had left to have a cigarette and came back, and she was dead. I always thought I grew up with a normal childhood, and did sports and all kinds of stuff, laughed, had fun, but I was also angry. I was extremely angry. This monster killed my mother. Like, if you would have had me draw a picture of this person, I would have said that they would have had horns and a pitchfork and a tail and breathe fire. I mean, they were a monster. They were my mother's killer. Well, I ended up, my dad remarried, and I ended up getting engaged, and we were doing premarital counseling. And I told the pastor that story, and he says, wow, he goes, I can see that you're still angry about that. He says, you should probably think about maybe going up to the hospital, and maybe you can ask the doctor and the nurse and anesthetist some questions. And I got to thinking about it, and I said, maybe that's a good idea. So I asked my dad, and he typed up this letter of permission or whatever, and my fiance and I headed up to the hospital. So we went up there, and the assistant administrator looked at the letter, and she says, well, I'm going to have to verify this is true. So she called my dad, and he said it was fine. So then she had us sit in her office, and she went over to the filing cabinets out in the lobby, and she was banging away on there way before computers. And she comes up back, and she's made photocopies, and comes back, and she gave us the paperwork. And so I'm looking at it, and I saw the doctor's name. I said, is there any chance I could talk to him? She goes, oh, he's long since retired. He's down in Florida. I said, well, that's convenient. But I didn't want to talk to him anyway, so I looked at the nurse anesthetist's name, and I said, what about this person? And she goes, oh, she's retired too. I said, oh, great. She goes, but her and Chester, that was the husband's name, they still live in town. Really? I said, is there any chance you could give me her address? Oh, yeah. So she gets, obviously this is before HIPAA. You guys should have seen how Sean Kirkite just... Boy, I thought he was going to pass out there for a minute. So she's out there banging away in the cabinets, and all of a sudden, her boss comes out and goes, hey, what you doing? She says, oh, we had a former patient who died. Her son's here, and he said the lady's name, wants her phone number and address. And he goes, you can't give that to him. He'll probably go kill her. I never thought about that, but I did hate her. So she came back in not knowing we had heard that, and she says, I'm sorry, it's against hospital policies. Do you feel better now, Sean? Okay. And so anyway, she says it's against hospital policy, and I said, well, thank you, and we gathered up everything. And I went straight down to the payphone, opened up the phone book, wrote down the address, and we were off to the races. Now, it was a hot August day. And I can remember two things that I heard when I got out of the car. I looked up in the house, you can see the number on it, so I knew we were at the right house. The door was open, and it was a screen door. It was the only thing shut. I could hear two things. I could hear the loud TV, so I knew they were home. And I could hear my heartbeat, which got louder each step that I took closer to the house. I finally got up to the door and I knocked on it. And this elderly lady, she comes up, can I help you? And I said, yes. I said, are you? And I said her name. She goes, yes, I am. And I said, well, my mother was a patient of yours. I said, is there any chance we could talk? And I'm sure, I was pretty agitated. I'm sure that if my fiance hadn't been with me, there's no way she probably would have let me in. But she did. And so she said, well, go ahead and sit on the couch. So my fiance and I sat on the couch, and she sat right diagonal, so kind of next to me in the chair. And I said, hey, can we turn down this TV? It's too loud. And she's like, sure. She got up, she turned off the TV, and she went and sat down, and I handed her my mother's charts. And she started paging through them, and I saw a tear trickle down. I thought, I got her. I said, you remember that? And she goes, of course I do. She said, 30 years, I and we lost one mother. And she goes, we did everything we could. I said, that's not what I heard. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I heard that you went out to have a cigarette and you came back and she was dead. She goes, I don't even smoke. And then she said, I promise you, we did everything we could to vacuum her out. We tried everything. And she says, I don't know if this is going to help you, but by this time she was sobbing. She said, I put so many people under anesthesia, and they always told me that all they could see was my eyes because of the mask. She said, so many people told me that they were nervous, and I would stroke their head, and I would look them right in the eyes, and they always came out and they told me how comforting my eyes were. And she goes, I want you to know, these eyes that are sobbing right now were the last eyes to look into your mother's. And she goes, I know that I calmed her down. Those tears and what she told me was like a baptism. Just all that issue and pain and anger and everything was gone. It was just lifted away. I went there looking for a monster, and I had left finding a friend. We talked for some more, hugged, and I left. A month or two later, my stepmom called and she said, hey, since you're going to be getting married here, we think that you and your brother should divide up your mother's heirlooms. I said, okay. And that's always weird when you do stuff like that. But we did. And she says, you can have anything you want. She said, except your brother wants one thing. He wants that cross-stitch picture with the little boy, the puppy dog. He wants that, the one that hangs in the living room. She could just as well have kicked me in the stomach. I said, yeah, I'll see you Tuesday, and I hung up. And I remember thinking about it, and there is no way that I wanted to give that up. That was mine. Mom and I made that together. And if I had not gone to see that nurse, there's no way I could have given that up. But I got thinking about it, like I had 8 great years with Mom, and my brother got held once. And I have 8 years of memories. He had nothing. So if that meant that much to him, I had to let him have it. And I remember when I would come home, and he had moved it from the living room into his bedroom, which was cool, but I remember when he went off to college, and I went to visit him in his dorm room. And I walk in his dorm, and I go, there was a poster of Spuds McKenzie, and gals in bikinis, and taekwondo belts. I mean, it was a typical dorm room. But then there was this picture of a cross-stitch picture of a little boy with a puppy dog and a poem. And it didn't seem to fit in unless you knew. And I knew that every